I'm Catherine Mangan. I'm Director of the Public Services Academy and also the Head of the Institute for Local Government Studies at the University of Birmingham. I'm here today to share with you some research and some work that we've been doing looking at the kind of skills and roles that public servants are going to need in the future, in particular how they're going to be able to innovate in the world of perma-austerity that public services are now operating within. I'm going to talk about the research that we've done into the 21st century public servant, which has come up with 10 themes around the roles and skills that public servants are going to need in the future. And I'm going to cover the ones today that are most relevant to thinking about innovation and how councils and other public sector bodies can do things differently. So the first finding from the research is that in the future our public servants are going to need to do a very different and new set of roles, and they're going to have to innovate by thinking very differently. So the kind of roles that we are encapsulating, and you can see on the slide, is this idea of a municipal entrepreneur. So somebody that works on behalf of a place and can come up with interesting ideas and different new ways of doing things for that place and with the people that live in that place. The other kind of roles that we see playing an important part in innovation are roles such as storyteller. We know how powerful it is when you say use stories about people's experience of the public services, particularly health journeys, health pathways, and ideas around being a resource weaver, so somebody that understands the kind of resources that are in a place and can bring those together in a different way than they have been done in the past. Ideas around a systems architect, so somebody that can actually design a new system for people that perhaps is something different and brings something new to public services. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. One of the reasons why public servants are going to have to work in a different way and focus on innovating and creativity is because our citizens are changing. So this is sort of end to deference. Citizens are much more able to represent themselves now. So, through social media, for example. So there's this sort of end of, looking to public services and public servants to sort of help them with things. And there's a real call from citizens to be able to do things with public servants and to be able to design their own kind of services. So we've seen this in the development of personal budgets in both social care and healthcare, where if you give the money to residents, they will come up with some very different models of support and care. And that's the kind of innovation that public servants are going to need to be able to do in the future. So that's sort of letting go of control, letting go of perhaps your professional expertise and working very much in partnership with citizens to design something new and something different. And when we talk about public servants, it's not just about the officers. As you can see on this slide, we've been doing some work looking at the kind of roles that our elected members are going to be playing in the future as well. And the kind of roles that we are thinking of there are, again, a steward of place. So, how can elected members work on behalf of a place? How can they create new things? Thinking about the idea of a catalyst, enabling residents to do, sort of different things, designing radical ideas and new ways of doing things. And again, this idea of an entrepreneur and perhaps an orchestrator who can bring together different people to have different conversations from those that they've had in the past. And when we've talked to councillors about this, for them, this is quite a radical shift in terms of not just being there to represent their residents, but actually working, with them to redesign services. And this might not just be about services because, all of the services are, being radically cut. So, for example, we've heard from councillors who have been asked by their residents about, well, what about the bus service? Now you've cut that, how am I going to get to the hospital? And instead of, sort of lobbying for that to be reinstated, what the councillors are now doing are having conversations about, okay, well, who do we know in the local area that perhaps has got a minibus, a driving licence, who would like to perhaps, accompany people on a shopping trip to the local superstore? Perhaps can we sort of set up group journeys to the hospitals. So it's about having the confidence and different type of thinking to have those different conversations. This kind of innovative and creative thinking is going to need a different set of skills for public servants. And what we found is that there's quite a sort of gap between the hard technical and professional skills that public servants have been recruited for in the past, they've been rewarded for. So if you're perhaps a planner, you are promoted on the basis of your knowledge of planning, whereas actually the kind of skills that are going to lead to innovative, creative thinking are much more about the softer skills. So relationship building, being able to listen, being able to sort of organise, perhaps being sort of more caring, so that idea of emotional intelligence, so understanding perhaps what the real issues are underneath some of the presenting issues. And these softer skills are becoming more and more highly prized, but what we're seeing is not necessarily a shift in the way that people are being recruited or rewarded. So there's still the focus on the hard technical skills, but actually we need to shift much more towards those softer, more generic skills in order for people to be able to come up with different ways of thinking. And we're seeing this particularly, for example, with social care commissioners who perhaps have been recruited for their ability to manage contracts. But actually in this new world of austerity, what they're needing to do is to be very creative about the kind of packages of support that they are commissioning for people. So it's no longer about home care, about residential care, much more about, sort of shared lives type of approach, the sort of circle of care kind of approach. And that's a shift for commissioners who in the past have thought in a very sort of transactional way to be much more transformational in the way that they're thinking. And as much as we need a different set of skills for our public servants, we also need our organisations to be very different. So moving away from the sort of traditional command and control, hierarchical bureaucracy. People that we talked to when we were doing the research talked about trying to be different and creative and a 21st century public servant, but they're working in 19th century style organisations. And we need to break those silos down and create an environment where people can be agile and they can work across different parts of the organisation and sort of get out of that, almost that sort of psychological, mind prison that people are in. It's very challenging to break those down because, again, people are quite sort of, beholden to those silos, feel quite comfortable with that. And actually this idea of sort of agile working, boundary spanning even within one organisation is still quite a challenge to people. But unless we give people the permission to sort of work across organisations, we're not going to get the creativity, we're not going to get the sort of serendipity that happens if if you're sitting next to somebody who's in a completely different part of the organisation from you. You share things, you learn things from them, and creativity can flow from that. So what we've been doing to help spark some different conversations and some creativity within public servants is we've come up with a set of playing cards that sort of challenge the way in which they're sort of currently thinking and currently organised. So for example, on the slide you can see we've got this idea of freedom to act. So you are not going to achieve different thinking, innovation within an organisation where people are sort of hidebound by processes. So this is about have people been given that freedom at all levels of the organisation to try things out, to take a bit of a risk. A senior chief executive said to me the other day that their mantra was for their staff was proceed until apprehended. And I think that's a really nice way of saying just get on and do things. We want, you're the ones with the ideas, you're close to the ground, you're close to people. We want you to get on with things, come up with new things. And I think something that's really central to innovation is this idea in the public service that we quite often have, that there is a single magic bullet out there, that there is one answer, that if we could just find that answer, we would solve childhood obesity, we'd solve social care problems. And actually we all know that that's not the case. And so what this is about in terms of releasing innovative, creative thinking is about that sort of incremental discussions about, well, what if we just tried this? This isn't working very well. How could we just, try and tweak this bit of the system to work better? And working with other people people and having those conversations daily is much more productive than trying for a big bang solution. And the final sort of suggestion I'm going to share with you is this idea of understanding the whole problem. We know that our public services are very siloed, even within combined authorities that we've got here in West Midlands and Greater Manchester that we're working with. There is still that sort of silo mentality, and it's very difficult to understand the whole problem and think creatively about what could be the answer to that big problem if you're thinking in silos. So the kind of work that we've been doing is working with frontline staff in a very particular local area, and asking them, what do you need to be able to do differently? What do you need to be able to change in order to make a difference to people here? And so, for example, in one small area in Suffolk, Lowestoft, they've been focusing on letting the frontline people, the police, the GPs, the counsellors, work things out for themselves, and they've had tremendous success in terms of reducing the number of rough sleepers, reducing the number of people sort of drinking on the streets, just by enabling people to come together and understand the whole of the problem. So we know that, for example, childhood obesity, there's not one cause of that, there's not one solution for that, and actually you need everybody in the room to be able to understand that whole problem, and then you can start thinking about what the solutions might be. I hope that was helpful. Shared with you some of the ideas that we've had about how we can release some of that innovation and creativity within our public services. I'm not here today, sadly, but more than happy to take questions by email and to continue the conversation. Thank you.